So they've lost the plot of life. Most people have lost the plot of life, and artists need to artists are needed. I think to tell me. Sometimes I think that all art is aimed at destroying our belief systems. Okay, because otherwise, what? It's just decoration. I mean, I love a good decoration, but that's what it is. So to destroy or shake up at least our belief systems, even just yeah, I think good art does that.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art. Welcome, everybody, once again to Way of the Artist. We've got a fantastic guest on the show today. We've got PJ Reece on the show, and let me tell you a little bit about him. PJ has been a professional writer for 30 years, and prior to that, a filmmaker for 20 years. And prior to that, he had a short career as a hydrometeorologist in Africa. We'll probably talk a lot more about his travels as well, because he's traveled to a lot of different places. And his name, PJ Reece, PJ comes from a Sanskrit name he picked up at an ashram in India in the 1970s. So maybe we'll get into that as well. He has a number of books for sale on Amazon and in his current hometown in Gibsons, British Columbia. And most notably and probably most famously of his books, he has a book called Story Structure Expedition Journey to the Heart of a Story. So excited to have you on the show, PJ. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this. Having never been a guest on a podcast, I'm anxious to see how this goes as well as you. So carry on. Let's go.
There's a first for everything.
Yeah, there's nothing to be concerned about, really. It's just we're all here having a conversation, seeing where it's going to go. We don't necessarily have any pressing, crazy questions. We'll just see where the universe wants to take us.
Good. Sounds good.
Can I ask you to start off? When did writing kind of start in your life? When did you kind of stumble upon it and then go get more serious about it? What's the journey into becoming a professional writer for you?
Good question. And I have almost an exact date in mind, because I was a filmmaker really from my mid-20s right up until my mid-40s. And in that time, I had been a documentary filmmaker mainly, had traveled the world. My wife and I were raising a son, and we were both happy to be away from home part of the time. So it was one of us home with the kid. But eventually, the kid, who was a fantastic kid, we had a great time growing him up. But we arrived in Vancouver, and we weren't there long before he said, "Pops, you have to settle down." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I've been to school for 7 years." He was 13 years old. "I've been to school for 7 years, and I've attended 15 different schools." And I said, you little liar, what are you talking about? And he started listing them off. In Edmonton, where we were, in Switzerland, where he was with his mother for a while, and then in Hawaii, and then in Oregon. And he was already in one school or two schools in Vancouver. Anyway, there were 15 schools. So he said, I need to settle down. Now, I was just landing in Vancouver from Edmonton, and I could not quite fit into the film crew scene in Vancouver. It was a totally different scene to me. It was so corporate and cold. And it didn't take me much to figure out, okay, I gotta stay home. I can't be out shooting. I'll become a writer. And that was really it. That must have been, the summer of 80, 86, 85, 86, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Wow. So there must have been a seed of something of writing that was there
you know, or was there a few things that you were kind of tossing around, or was writing a clear step for you at that moment?
Well, you know, I'd been on some very interesting shoots. I remember one of them, which was quite recent, was called The Last Harpoon, a documentary about the whalers down in the Caribbean on the island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the remnants of the Nantucket whalers. These are the Caribbean crews, the descendants of the Caribbean whaling crews that the Nantucket whalers used to come down, pick up, you know, on their way out to the whaling season. These were those fishermen who would every year for 2 or 3 months would go chasing whales, and they were still doing that. And maybe they didn't, maybe they got one, maybe they didn't. But it was such an interesting shoot to go out on the water with these poor fishermen chasing after whales in little boats with no motor, just a sail and oars. And it was a fantastic shoot, but it was fraught with political problems with the first lady of the country. And I was so cheesed with her that I started to write the story called The Last Harpoon, a screenplay, in which in which this whale hunt got almost, I forget how it played out at this point, but you know, starred a journalist, investigative journalist who was down there doing the story on it. So anyway, that got me going, and I just wanted to get that screenplay done. I rented a cabin on Gabriola Island for 2 years, mainly for weekends, but I wound up staying there all the time and coming into town only on Wednesday to take writing courses at a little school called the Kootenai School of Writing, just on Broadway. Wonderful school. People have fond memories of it. I don't know if it exists anymore, but that's what I came in from Gabriola on Wednesdays and took the course and went back. So that was for a couple of years. That was my training. Mm. So I came back into town and realized I had to make a living on this now. So I just started banging on doors of film companies down in Yaletown, producers that I knew, filmmakers I knew, and I was amazed how much work was just lying there, writing work was just lying there waiting for a writer to come along, because these producers do not know how to write a letter, much less a treatment or, you know, a script. So yeah, I managed to cobble together an existence as a writer through the late 80s, early 90s, through the 90s, really, yeah.
Yeah, and you got like obviously really proactive about it by going out and knocking on doors and reaching out to people. And
well, you know, it was yeah. I'd have contracts, and suddenly they'd dry up, right? Suddenly you would, oh my God, I've got nothing else. I've got nothing to do. So I would go knocking on doors, and it was uncanny how I'd stand at the secretary's, you know, the reception. I'd say, is Harold in? And she'd say, oh, I'll see. And so Harold would come out, and he'd say, PJ, we were just talking about you. You know, they weren't talking about, but they needed somebody to write something.
Yeah.
That came out of a meeting they just had half an hour ago, right?
Yeah.
And so it was being in the right place at the right time. Mm. And so I was just, you know, what I was doing was I was just trying to establish my name, myself as a writer. I mean, I would lie in bed at night during those years. I remember just lying looking at the ceiling saying, I am a writer. I am a writer. I am a writer, because I had to go into these offices sounding like a writer, you know, sounding like I felt like I was a writer, that I knew I was a writer. And I think it was that, you know, that conviction that sort of grew till finally I had a reputation in the film community there as a writer. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can totally relate to that. I think, you know, there's lots of great writers out there, but people who are not proactive about going out and connecting with people, which is something Evan and I used to talk about a lot when we started this podcast. We used to actually have this under a different name, but it was about where artistry meets industry. And we kind of talked a lot about how you take your art and you actually bring it to the industry and try to, you know, create something, right? And I think what you just shared is a good example of that. And then on another note, like, laying there in your bed saying I'm a writer or looking in the mirror, whatever you're doing. I think like every person that wants to do something, we all struggle to some degree with, you know, like, who am I to do this? You know, that imposter syndrome kind of thing. And you kind of got to talk yourself into it. You got to kind of be like, okay, like this is what I want to do. I am this, I'm going to do this. We're going to, because at a certain point, you just got to jump in, and you got to give it a shot, or you've never given it a shot at all, I think.
Yeah, that's so true, because the group of people I grew up with, a real smart bunch from school. They were umpteen master's degrees. One fellow turned out to be the editor-in-chief of the Globe and Mail for 10 years. And for them, I imagine they were looking at me and wondering, what is he doing being a writer? Like, we're the writers here,
Right.
But as it turns out, I've published 7 books, and 3 of them with traditional presses and 4 or non. And they have not. What can I say? So I get these now. They're scattered all over the place, but I often get these nice little emails, congratulating me for doing exactly what you're talking about. Being proactive and just getting the job done and and of course making a living. I have to make a living. I had to make a living at this writing. I remember occasionally when I did run out of money, I would often answer an ad in the province, to sell something. I needed to pay the rent. So I would go down to some little warehouse on Annacis Island and to see what they were selling. Because believe it or not, I used to love selling door to door and make money. And I would make it quick. I'd go out for a month and just bust my ass selling anything, water filters, memberships in the Western Canada Wilderness Committee, vacuum cleaners. I did vacuum cleaners. Yeah. And in my spare time, I actually canvassed raise money for the Arthritis Society and multiple sclerosis and this sort of thing. I actually loved going door to door.
That's amazing. I mean, that's such an important part. Like if there's one thing, well, there's 2 things that I always try to impart onto like artists and people that want to do something with their life that's not just status quo, is that, one is that you gotta, you gotta just get over yourself and put yourself out there, because you're never going to feel good enough. You're never going to feel like you're qualified. And I think the other thing too is like, I think we need to disregard a lot of the education that we get, because I actually think it's a backwards model where people learn and they think, oh, like there's the authority and they're going to teach me, and then I'm going to learn enough, and you never quite feel like you're there. And you got to realize at some point that you're the author of your life, you're the authority. And like at some point you got to decide, like, this is my story, this is my life, and I'm going to start telling it or living it, whatever you want to call it. Because otherwise, you
have to become a black sheep.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Yeah.
I wear this around town to many people's chagrin. But I think we need these black sheep these days. We need these people to, live for themselves, or to honor their own interests. And I often think, what if I was young today? What would I do in this society that seems to be increasingly authoritarian, or there seem to be fewer career paths? It all seems to hover around a computer. I would absolutely want to be an artist of some type today, just to get away from that, the pressures of all that business and business where you have to sit at a computer all the time. Is there anybody doing door-to-door sales anymore? I doubt it.
Yeah. Well, people don't even want to be. People don't want to pick up their phone anymore. A text message or an email, right? Like there's so much little human connection. But when you break through that, like, you call someone up and you actually get a conversation, it can be extremely meaningful, because, people, they don't always have meaningful conversations. You know what I mean? They don't always have these personal connections, because it's all so digital. Like we're all so removed from each other. And I think part of the artist thing is you're connecting people, whether it be through a script or a novel or maybe an acting performance. You're actually bringing people in and you're giving them human connection, right? Like that's what artists do. And you're sharing something that's inside of you very vulnerably, very openly. And that's why I think a lot of people feel like they know actors. They feel like they know them, because really good actors share something with you that makes you feel like I know who that guy is, or I know who that girl is, or whoever, right? It's like, but you don't, but they shared something real, and that gives you like this kind of connection.
Well, I think actors, I've never been an actor.
Yeah.
I, in a way, wish I had been, had some actor training, but I do know sort of somewhat what they go through, at least some of the actors back in the day, some of these like almost encounter groups, just tear yourself apart. You get torn apart, you get your bogusness exposed and laid bare. I know some of these actor training events were like that, and I went through that in all my India ashram days and before and after here in North America as well. So yeah, and I sometimes wonder why that doesn't happen anymore, because that's like radical surgery. It seems to work really quickly to find out how bogus our belief systems are and how they hold us back, and how to break through these restricting beliefs we have. Anyway, that's another.
I know you want to jump in, Evan, but there's something I actually just to kind of second on that. Evan and I did this course called The Mastery. I did it twice. Evan and I did it once together later on. And but it was, both times were great. But the first time that I did it, I was probably only 17, 18 years old. And there's this part during this intensive weekend where everyone stands up and they share something like a monologue, something about their life, right? It's like they share their story. It's kind of a part of the whole thing. And I remember at 17, never hearing anything like this in my entire life. And I felt like I had a glimpse into humanity that I was so like on the outside of, like I didn't even know existed. And I started to understand people and their struggles and how I related to them, even though I hadn't experienced what they had experienced. And some of the stories they were telling almost seemed like things that didn't even happen in real life. At that point, like I honestly thought this stuff happens in movies or shows, but this isn't real life, right? And I was just like, it transformed my life forever, And I think that when you don't get these kind of deep human connections, when you don't like really see the inside of what's going on with other people, you can feel very alone in the world and also be very disconnected from your own self, because, it's this whole world that maybe you feel like you have to hide, right? Hide from the world. But I think art makes you go, I'm not going to be scared of hiding that anymore. I'm going to bring that out. I'm going to put that onto the page, or put that into the performance or the artwork or the music or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, it's
yeah, no, I relate to
everyone's just nodding. I'm like,
no, sometimes I see people, I see people, I think they need a good shake-up. You say, you should go to Pune and do an encounter group. Pune, India is where I used to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Radical surgery.
Yeah.
A weekend, 5 days, done. Never be the same.
Yeah. No, those sort of deep explorations of yourself. I think that, if anyone who's seriously considering being an artist or taking something that they do and taking it to a level of artistry, that I would say necessitates a deep exploration of self. There's got to be, you've got to dig underneath all of those layers of conditioning, like you were mentioning, all those deep layers of conditioning and our beliefs and things like that, in order so that we can really kind of get to the we can really get to the gold, really get to what is the thing that really animates us, what is the thing that kind of goes underneath even the desire to do art in itself, like what kind of comes even before that.
Yeah. What is that? What is this desire to do art? That's an interesting question. Yeah.
Do you have some thoughts?
I mean, I never considered myself an artist. I still don't. I was just somebody who wanted to get out into the world and live as much as I could and travel, and I wound up writing. And it was a real perfect for me in my journey. But what was the question? What is art? Yeah, I think. Well, this is. I think it derives from. Tell me what you think about this. I think it derives from the rift between what society wants for us and what the spirit wants for us, because they're two totally different things.
Mm.
Society, we set up societies so we're safe, right? And so everything works for us. We can where things are easy, but mainly safety. But the spiritual journey requires absolutely the opposite. Absolutely the opposite. Nobody's getting anywhere if they sit on their couch nice and safe. And so we have to leave home. We have to get in that boat and head up the Congo River. And society doesn't want you to do that. Society doesn't want people out there breaking the rules and being black sheep. And so, yeah, I see some basic rift between what society wants of us and what we need for our greatest happiness. They're just two completely different things.
Is that a theme that you would say you explore in your writing a lot?
Well, I think if I was to write a memoir, which I don't think I'll do, but I can see about 6 or 7 stages from my life, starting when I was 6 years old and coming. I mean, I can list these 7 stages if you want, or however many there are, but right up to studying fiction. It goes right from when I was 6 years old. I fell through a house under construction. I was 6 years old, landed on the concrete floor, thought I was going to die, had a satori, really, saw myself dying, couldn't breathe, couldn't move. And it was okay. It was okay, whatever was happening. Mm. And not that I didn't think about that for years and years and years and years, but I did remember it as if it happened yesterday when he dwelled on it. Anyway, from that right through a number of travels, things that happened to me in Africa, dangerous situations I got into, which threw me into much the same situation. And that is, I was helpless. I couldn't physically get myself out of that situation. I couldn't think my way out of that situation. So the mind became a useless thing. And I just, you just give up, you surrender. And then once the surrender happens, you see clearly. So through my Rajneesh years in India, through becoming a very good friend of a psychologist, Dr. Dabrowski, who had a theory of positive disintegration. That's a whole long story, but I won't go into it right now. But again, it just briefly, his theory of mental development was that we go through a series of psychic disintegrations, right? And we emerge, we integrate on a higher level each time, higher level. So that was a big part of my life in the 70s. And then when I started to study fiction, I started to see, and I was reading scripts for producers, I was writing my own. And honestly, I can remember it was watching Moonstruck, Cher in Moonstruck. And there's a woman who has this belief system that's killing her. Love hurts. Love hurts. It's a common theme in movies, like love hurts, so I'm not going to love anywhere near me. Mm-hmm. Of course, Nicolas Cage goes to work on it, right? Mm-hmm. And finally, when he gives this great speech after the opera. You guys see the movie Moonstruck?
It's been a while since I've seen it.
Okay, well,
But it's a Shanley script, and I love John Patrick Shanley.
It is John Patrick Shanley. And it was interesting watching him receive the Academy Award for that. I think that also made me want to write screenplays. Anyway, she comes to believe that she comes to see, not think it through, but she comes to see that her belief systems that she's held, that love hurts, is killing her, right? It's going to ruin her life. And she surrenders that belief system and goes off with the brother of the guy she's engaged to. So anyway, yes, fiction was sort of the capper for me. I realized that everything that I'd learned about surrendering our sense of self, our bogus sense of self, our phantom sense of self, everything about that, that's what films are about. Every hero reaches this point where they realize their strategies are no good. The strategies have only brought them pain. I mean, what about the artist? Remember The Artist a few years ago, that French film that looked like a black and white silent movie?
Yeah.
They dragged that guy. I couldn't believe that they took away so much from him, his career, his money, his home, his everything. I couldn't believe they kept taking stuff away from him. I was expecting the film to reach its, the second act crisis, or they didn't get the third act. They just kept destroying this guy. And I could see exactly what the writers were doing. Even I don't think writers often know that what they're doing in this case. That they just know they have to bring that character to a point where he no longer hangs on to his old self, his past. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I've been doing with writing ever since. And that's what story structure, expedition, journey to the heart of a story is all about. Also a little ebook I wrote called Story Structure to Die For, which is a 40-page ebook. It came out in 2012, and it's made more money at $2.99 on Amazon. It's made more money than all the other books combined. So,
that's amazing.
So the hero must die. That's the message.
Yeah,
the hero must die.
Yeah. You have to. You do. You have to die to your ego. This identity of, and I think that the interesting thing about watching a transformation in a film, I think something that's very fascinating is you find somebody who they don't have the things at the beginning that would allow them to be able to do whatever it is they need to do. And then they find it along the way. And that can be quite inspiring, because it's like, I think a lot of the time as an artist or just anybody who's doing their life, they don't feel like right now, it's like, I have these dreams, right? And it's like, I don't feel like I add up to being able to do it. And maybe in this moment, that's true. But if I die to my ego, I can become that thing that would be able to do it. So when you have a vision or something, you shouldn't base it on the fact that who you are today is all you'll ever be. Like, you're going to go down this journey and you're going to stumble, you're going to fall, you're going to come across some things.
I think it's good to know that.
Yes.
But I don't think you can orchestrate your own calamity. Nobody in the right mind would do that. So you've got to continue thinking you're the greatest and you're going to do it. Like if somebody thought that, okay, I need to disintegrate. Right. Well, that'd be an interesting story, because they would, but not in the way they thought,
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And how would you know what was the right thing for you? If you try to do it like, oh, I'm going to orchestrate my own calamity, like, how would you know that that's the right thing you need? Because you don't know what you need until you find yourself in the situation where it's demanded of you.
Yeah, I'm writing a story right now, a young adult novel. I have a youth thing going on here. I have a commitment to help kids. That's another story. But I think it's called How to Steal a Rolls Royce, and it's a father-son road story. And then the kid has to come to this realization. He figures he's owed, like he's owed by his father because his father's not been around. Okay. Mm-hmm. And he's got, that's what his grudge, that's his default grudge. But he has to, that's his belief system. So I've got to destroy that. Mm-hmm. Now, so anyway, to cut the chase, in the end, of course, he realizes that he owes his father. Okay, in simplest terms, that he owes his father in ways that he never knew. Mm. So that's the and that's the switch in his belief system.
Mm. So this is maybe like, this was a question that I kind of wanted to ask earlier, but now seems to be the perfect moment. It seems to have naturally come up now. So you studied writing, you did your work, you trained in doing that, but you've also written your own books about story. Was there something that I mean, and maybe we've already been talking about it and touching on it, but was there something that you weren't getting in how you were trained to write that made it necessary for you to write these books on storytelling?
Yeah, it was the Joseph Campbell's stuff, the hero's journey, and he would get to the inmost cave, right? That's basically the Act Two crisis, I think, and yes, it was the dark night of the soul, blah blah blah, and all writers, McKee, Robert McKee's fantastic on this. He comes closest to what I think, but so many of these writing manuals would describe that event as the hero like reaching into his little bag of tricks and pulling out, Bonnie deciding that he's going to be sincere or real or authentic or whatever. If he's deciding, he's still in deciding mode, and there's got to be some more scenes to destroy him till he gives up everything his mind coughs up, everything that his mind will come up with. No more strategies, absolutely no more strategies. It's a complete psychic disintegration, complete surrendering, and then you see, Marcel Proust talks about the veil of habit, which and conditioning, which when it lifts, you see the whole universe. So it's just that our beliefs just obstruct the view. Anyway, to get back to your question, I realized that none of these manuals were talking about that crisis as really a spiritual event. It was an awakening in the purest form. And I look at all these movies in those scenes, like the Cher movement, and my God, Good Will Hunting. The crisis in Good Will Hunting when Matt Damon is with Robin Williams. God, I can't even think of that scene without choking up. Mm-hmm. He's just, he's not deciding anything. He's falling apart, and he sees, he sees his life for what it is, and if he proceeds one more step along the way that he's been behaving his whole life, he might as well kill himself. That's what it comes to. You might as well kill yourself. Mm-hmm. And of course, in the artist, that's the scene. He actually has a gun in his mouth. I think in that scene, he's gonna blow his head off. So I felt, where's that book? I felt that Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. I don't know. Have you read that? Trip Up the Congo River. It's the most incredible
started
thing.
it years ago. I had started it. I never completed
Joseph
it.
Conrad, as far as I'm concerned, he wrote that story, and this is what this is, right? This is a trip up the Congo River following Joseph Conrad's riverboat captain. River as a metaphor for story, where he gets up there so far, he's so far from home, nothing makes sense, nothing he thinks works, and he gets his mind blown, basically, and that's what the Act Two crisis is about. So that's what I was trying to say, that this is a spiritual event, and I've been banging on that drum for some time. Interestingly, when I wrote that little story structure to die for, I had this amazing response from a woman in New York. She was an editor. She said she's been teaching creative writing for 35 years, and she never understood what story was about till she read my little book. So that was
I think
that made me happy.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I think that it's so interesting because what you're saying, it's one of those things, like this spiritual nature, where it's like, it's something that whenever you hear it, it feels so new, even though it's nothing new at all, to a certain extent. I hope I didn't say anything offensive there to you in this, but no. It's, I've found the same thing. I've got a book that I'm self-publishing for actors because there were certain things that I was learning and seeing about acting that I just was not getting from any of my teachers. And I said, why is this not there? And there's a spiritual slant to the whole thing. Which, you know, we're kind of in the world we're in that very much has tried to steer away from anything that we might call spiritual as being, you know, unnecessary or as being an antiquated idea. And yet, to me, it's some of these things that come from our oldest wisdom traditions, that have so much to say, you know, and that isn't as definable. I find that, like, we live kind of in a culture that hates this sense of mystery, that has this sort of that kind of despises being in an unknown space, which is, you know, precisely the area where creativity thrives, is precisely the area where transformation occurs. I don't know if I have a question here, but in all of that, but just I don't know. Do you, like, I'm just really touched by what you're bringing back into this sort of something that I feel has been neglected.
Yeah, well, to be an artist really is to be a rebel in this society that's getting increasingly homogenous and increasingly acquiescent or whatever. I mean, yeah, that's why I would have to be an artist if I was younger. Again, as a survival technique, if nothing else. But there's a little quote where this comes from. A little note about freedom here. The most vital among us would rather die than live without freedom. The most vital among us would rather die than live without freedom. Most people are rather too fearful of death to value freedom. And I think that's what's happening today, this whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
So they've lost the plot of life. Most people have lost the plot of life. And artists need to, artists are needed, I think, to, Tommy, sometimes I think that all art is aimed at destroying our belief systems. Okay, because otherwise, what? It's just decoration. I mean, I love a good decoration, but that's what it is. So to destroy or shake up at least our belief systems, even, you know, just I think good art does that.
I agree with that. I think that's totally true. One of my favorite films that's ever been made is a film called Fight Club. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah, well, yeah.
Chuck Palahniuk wrote the novel, which is equally awesome. But this book and this story and this movie, you know, 1999, I was about 16, and it was profound for me. Such a shifting experience. I didn't even know what to think of it. When I walked out of the theater, I was like in a daze, and I was probably in a daze for about 2 weeks, just walking around going, what did I see? What happened there? Like something has happened. Like I've changed. I was so young. I didn't know how to articulate anything. And then all of a sudden I had a realization that I was like, I think I know what happened. Now, the thing is like, there was this speech where he talks about, and he says, we have no great war. We have no Great Depression. Our war is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives. And at that time, I was watching my parents go through a divorce. They had built up all this money. They had become millionaires, and we were losing everything. And I remember my dad coming to me and saying, a lot of things are going to change. You know, you're going to be living in a smaller place and all of this stuff, which I went from living in a mansion to living in a trailer park, just to give you an idea how extreme it was. And I remember being like, I don't care. I don't care about any of this stuff. I don't care that we're losing the boat and the Porsche and all this shit. I don't care. My family is splitting up, and everybody seems to be so angry and so upset. And I realized that none of this material shit matters anymore. Like this whole idea and I had been indoctrinated up until I was 16 into like, you got to be famous, you got to be successful, you got to be a millionaire, you got to do all this stuff. And I'd say that the change occurred at 16. I wouldn't say that I had the full epiphany at 16. That took probably another decade to like really solidify, but it was the beginning stage of transformation and this idea, of what was normal and what was usual kind of like dying away, because this anarchy of almost like just living into this system, and it was weird because like I didn't even know what I saw, and but the art can do that, and it was so ahead of its time that a lot of people didn't even understand it at the time. But now, if you talk to people about it, obviously everybody knows about it because it became so famous. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there's a certain amount of like, I feel like, to kind of like further my point, I feel like right now people think that we can somehow be happy as machines, that you can somehow just follow the path of life and do what you're told, and someone can be your authority and you'll somehow be happy. And I just personally don't believe that's true. I think you have to be willing to go off on your own and find your own way and find your own life. And if you don't, I think you're going to be, all the materialism, no matter how much success you get, I think you're going to be disappointed. I think you're going to find out that it's all empty and that you've been fooled, and that real fulfillment comes from within. It comes from with finding this spirit inside yourself,
And people better learn that early on. If you learn that, I think as a kid, you really, really carry that through your life. I see a lot of people in my age now who are retired and they don't know what to do with themselves. And retirement, lasts forever now, lasts for decades. And people are, sort of desperate for some meaning and
because like all that stuff you have, all that money, like it's not going to give you meaning. I mean, it might help you facilitate things. It's not bad to have money and have things, but like without purpose, without meaning, without connection, like none of that stuff matters.
No, here's an interesting thing I just came upon recently reading a book. Stephen Jenkinson, he lives down in Ottawa Valley. He's sort of a death guru. He tends people and dying, and he's worried about the elders in our community. Now that I brought that up, and it's true that youth do not respect old people anymore, and I don't blame them. I don't blame youth for all sorts of reasons. The world is not offering them much these days, if you ask me, and also old people. What are they doing? They have most of the wealth, for one thing, and they're just trying to spend it. They're just trying to extend their middle age. They're not gracefully going into old age. They're traveling everywhere, and spending, and of course the classic example of some old guy who buys a Porsche, is sort of pathetic. But so youth see old people as not elders. They're not elders. They're old, but they're not elders because I think it's because they haven't embraced loss. They haven't embraced loss. And that's what I think old people need to do. They need to learn that, to give up all this consumption and this, like I say, extended middle age. Nobody wants to get old anymore. But I think young people need to see old people who have embraced the end, so that they know that we don't live forever. It's just unbecoming of an old person to dress hip and drive a fast car and Anyway, don't get me going on that.
No, that really, like, you took a little bit of my breath away there with that one statement. To be honest, there, like, that distinction between we have old people and not elders. That hits something for me. I'm probably going to be thinking about that after we finish this conversation. Yeah. I don't have anywhere to go from there necessarily, but that
I would say that, like, the thing about elders, you look back to our lineage of humanity, right? It's like elders were the mentors. They were like the guides. They gave you, they were there to give younger people a certain amount of appreciation for their lives, to recognize the connections they had made at the end. And I think as you become older, you go through this invincible stage in your younger years, but then you become vulnerable once again, almost like a child to some degree. You start to, your health becomes, it's just like there's you're not going to be going out fighting the wars anymore. You're not going to be doing the battle. And so the elder person, with their wisdom and their experience, has a certain amount of, like understanding for the journey. Because I think when you're young and you're invincible, you're actually quite confused because you're not convinced. You're not invincible. You think you are, but you're not invincible. You know what I mean? And I think part of the problem with youth is that people think they'll live forever. And so then their goals and their dreams, they go, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that later. I'll I don't like this job, but I'm going to work it for a little while longer. And they just keep putting it off. And the elder is there to say, like, you're going to die. And I'm lucky for every day I have alive right now. And I appreciate it. But like, young people they think they're going to live forever. Right. And one day you're not going to have it in you. You're not going to have the chance, the opportunity. You might not even be alive to live. And, you're going to have to face yourself at the end. Right. And I think the elders, they help young people have an appreciation and respect for their youth. There's that saying, youth is wasted on the young. I think it's true. I think like a lot of time people don't realize, like, you got a chance to go, and if you really are like, if you have this passion, like, now's the time, like, stop waiting around. Like, today's the day, you got to go for it. Because
that raises a couple of questions. I can think of one of them right now. What's the other one? Well, the first one, I can't keep them both in my head at the same time. But I started traveling when I was 17. My grandfather took me to the old country to play golf at St. Andrews. Okay, and that opened my eyes. I was from Edmonton. I was a prairie boy. I remember being in downtown in Soho, in London, at 4:00 in the morning, and going, "Whoa!" My life began in Soho at 4:00 in the morning when I was 17. And so subsequently, I just kept traveling. After high school, I spent a year in Europe, bumming around, and it was just, I've traveled ever since. But does everybody have that opportunity? Does everybody have that inclination? Does everybody have the ability, whether financial or whatever? I remember I was on a film shoot up in northern BC. We were doing some economic film on mining and whatnot. But much of left. The crew was pretty much left. I mean, we all were back then, politically left. And I was going on with my little sort of spiritual thing. I think the director was in the front, said, he got pissed off at me. He said, PJ, not everybody, wears your pants or whatever. Not everybody has the opportunity that you've had. And we've got to remember that not everybody has the potential, to be free or smart or whatever. I know, even a psychopath, it really isn't to blame in a way, because they are born with no developmental potential, according to Dabrowski. According to me, they're born without the developmental potential. We see them as assholes. They've got to be locked up to protect our society, But in a way, it's not their fault. So let's not go to that extreme. But just how responsible is everybody to for their own journey? I don't know. That's a question I don't know the answer to really. But sometimes it just makes me step back and not be so critical of people who can't.
Hey, it's Evan with a quick public service announcement. If you're enjoying the conversation you're hearing and finding it helpful, then please help us and take a second to subscribe to the podcast. And we can all be people helping other people, and that's awesome. Now back to the show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think that I think the thing is like, yeah, not everybody is gonna like, there's gonna be a certain time in your life, right? I think the thing is that's the thing is like, can you hear it? Are you ready to hear it? You know what I mean? I mean, everybody's in their own stage. And I don't like, there's lots of stuff that when I was younger, I'm like, oh, I wish I knew this when I was younger. But, you know, you learn it when you learn it. And, um, you know, I think, but my point here, I think, was this like, the elder person or the person who has maybe a little life experience, I think it's important that people encourage younger people to go for it instead of play it safe, you know, do everything right, make sure you're okay. Like, don't waste your life on trying to be safe. I think like that's poor advice. You know, I think I think, yeah, you need to take some concession. You need to like be responsible to some degree, learn some responsibility. But at the same time, I mean, like, you know, this life, man, like it can pass you by and then you haven't even lived it.
Well, yeah, my mission at this point, especially in writing this third young adult novel, I wanted to address it to boys. It wanted to be a boys' book because I feel for boys in this day and age's culture. I think they're getting short shrift. I think they're back getting screwed over. But so as an elder, I would like to be an elder. So that's my quandary. What's appropriate behavior for somebody my age in these times? So I'm writing this book. That's what I do, and I'm hoping that they'll read it. Now, more and more, I think, you know, I ask around, asking parents, you know, would your 15-year-old son read a book? You know, well, they don't read books. They don't read books. I was in the Roberts Creek Library a couple of weeks ago. My wife was delivering her new novel there. She's got a new novel. And I was asking the librarian, I said, in your time here, has ever a 15-year-old boy come into this library to take out a book? And she goes, I don't think so. So I realized I'm in trouble. You know, my business plan is probably not going to work. And I'm thinking of upgrading my story to be like, in fact, I'm not calling it a book. I'm calling it a movie for a young person on the verge of life. But now I'm thinking of calling it a movie for the 16-year-old in all of us, something like that, so that it just will find a broader audience. So that's my quandary these days. But anyway, I am going to target kids in various other ways too.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, now I've had a little bit of time for, you know, this all sort of this can of worms that you sort of opened up here to work on me a little bit. You know, I can just, I sense in my own self, and I think that there's probably a lot of other people who are, you know, my age and younger, because, like, you know, we're in our 30s, but younger. It's just acknowledging that that sort of feeling that you gave me and that distinction you made is just how much there's actually such a deep need, a sense of a deep need and craving for elders, you know, for elders that to look up to with respect. Because very often, you know, like in my, to a lot of the boomers, and the boomers get crapped on quite a bit too now these days, especially by youth. But, you know, the boomers, as I understand, like, they were sort of, it's been identified that, narcissism is sort of the collective condition of the boomers. And it's a challenge to try and find wisdom when you're looking at something like that. Not that it isn't there, but even from in my own sort of relationship with you know, with my own parents who are lovely people. They're not even necessarily people that I look to for advice. And so now I'm just sort of questioning as to, well, why is that? What's what's that all about? You know, when you're looking to elders to give you answers and or to have something to say, and you just don't think that it's going to be there, that there's anything to be found there. It's an interesting sort of belief, I guess, that I've been walking around with and carrying, that probably needs some shattering at some point. Yeah.
So, and unless you had something to say, I was going to ask you, like, you seem to have traveled the world a lot and were called to go out and explore and, you know, experience new things and new cultures and stuff like that. Like, why was that? What got you to go from basically being like, you know, a farm boy to being like a world traveler?
Interesting. Yeah, not exactly a farm boy. I did live in the city, but yeah, no, I tell you, I think characterized my youth. It was just the most sort of normal, blissfully normal existence in Edmonton. You know, nothing but opportunity. It was just sports. You know, I mean, just sports and school, and I loved school. I was captain of all these sports teams. I don't remember many crises or stress at all. And yet something was obviously in me to start questioning and becoming a contrarian, which is what I'm afraid I am, contrarian. It may have that 6-year-old accident may have had something to do with it, because it shook my body up and definitely shook my mind up. I mean, I used to skate around the rink. You know, this ice rink in the local community. I don't know whether you ever had the pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
But every community had its own ice rink, and we'd skate around, social skating. But I would skate around the opposite way. For some reason, my skates could bite in going clockwise as opposed to everybody going anti-clockwise. And so that was the first of my contrarian ism. What were we talking about? What was the question?
Well, just like what inspired you to go travel.
Oh, yeah. Right. I remember, so there was something obviously in me, but I remember reading Lawrence Durrell. Do you know Lawrence Durrell? He wrote, he's a British writer. He wrote a quartet of books called the Alexandria Quartet. It was 4 books from 4 different points of view of this group of people in Alexandria, Egypt. And they were British. I guess they're British and Egyptian. They were all friends. They were in exotic location. They all had relationships with each other. You know, philosophical, political, sexual, the whole thing. And I think I saw that life that appealed to me a lot. To me, that was life. To have this close-knit group of friends who were all friends and lovers. And I think that may have been what got me started traveling away from home and really valuing friendship, valuing close friends. Maybe that's why I wound up in this ashram in Pune. You know the Rajneesh story of going through Rajneesh. He had that commune in Oregon a number of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
The guy with all the Rolls Royces and all that.
Oh, anyway, you were part like the Wild Wild Country.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So you were part of that whole.
Yeah.
So
Osho.
Would you?
Osho.
So would you call that? Would you call that a cult?
Ha ha ha. It sure looks like a cult, doesn't it? The word doesn't. I don't care if it is a cult or not. A good time was had by all.
Yeah.
And I for sure, if you're an outsider, you can't. It'd be difficult to glean what was going on inside. You know.
Sure.
And of course, the whole thing about Rajneesh or Osho was destroy your beliefs. You know, that was the whole thing. That's why his ashram in India was the supermarket of therapies back in the 70s. All the best leaders, group leaders from California and around the world in Germany, they all showed up in Pune, and they were all giving these groups, and they were heavy duty, and they were, you got your beliefs shaken, you got reduced to a puddle, but it was all in this cocoon of love. It was everybody was there to support everybody. I mean, that was the whole point of it. Whole point of it is you disintegrate, and and we're there for you because the aftermath is so important. Of being distressed. So.
Well, I'm curious about this because from the documentary, right? It seemed like it was amazing, like in a certain way for everybody who was involved, at least in the beginning of it all. But then things seemed to go terribly wrong, down the road. Like, were you still a part of it at that point, and you kind of left, or like, what was your experience of that?
No, I think it was pretty much accepted that woman who managed the ranch, Sheila, was a bit of a psychopath,
right?
And she clearly did not her state of mind. I mean, maybe she needed to be tough, but most people thought, "What the fuck is she doing?" Just destroying it as far as we were concerned,
right?
And so and then so it came to an end, and we all went our different ways. Probably was time for it to pack up anyway. Although, I think it certainly changed my life.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like, I mean, like with this type of stuff, it seems like there's a certain kind of like when people come together in a state of love and connection and all of these good things, like some of the best part of humanity comes out, right? But then if some type of authoritarian thing comes in and tries to manipulate that and use that and control and direct it, they can take a good thing and make it bad. You know what I mean? Because like I've had kind of an experience of something like that where, it's like a group of people doing really good things together, but if something is behind it that's not good, if there's something that's kind of directing it, they can take your trust and your good values and your connections and use that all against you in a way. And when you watch the documentary, which I did, I found like you can kind of see how you could get all swept up in this and really kind of enjoy that. And I don't really remember how it all kind of played out at the end, but I just remember it like it seemed to go really, really bad. And these kind of very well-intended, good people kind of got taken advantage of. That's kind of what I observed.
You mean the well-intended, the sannyasins, the red people themselves?
Yeah.
I don't think they got taken advantage of. They realized they think they had their fun, and now it was sort of ruined, and so let's go home.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah, I don't think because there was just I think we just blamed it all on Sheila, and of course the Osho himself had to take some blame too.
Sure.
And he's just a human being.
Right.
He maybe he lost his enlightenment. Who knows? Right. Maybe he got drawn back into his personality. Yeah, I don't want to speculate. I got out of there just before the end. He had said in that previous year, the experiment is over.
Right.
Go and live the best way you can. But the whole Pune years, we amongst people like myself, we talk about the Pune years as opposed to the ranch years in Oregon.
Right.
Quite different experiences.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where you got your name PJ. Is that correct?
Yeah. It stands for Parajayo. The Sanskrit word is Parajayo. And it means beyond defeat. Beyond defeat.
Nice.
It's coming in useful these days because I'm a contrarian around town, and I'm having to get really centered as the storm rises around me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Brandon, what are you thinking? Should we take a quick little? We're a little past the 1 hour mark. Should we have a little beverage break and then maybe dive into some questions?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, I can go first if you want.
Sure.
I'm drinking a beer from where is this from? I'm trying. There's so many different. I haven't had this one before, and I'm trying to understand where this comes from. Okay, so this is from La Cervecería Astilleros, and for the very Spanish name, it's from North Vancouver. And this is called the Cara Orange Safflower Blonde Ale. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah.
Cool.
It's good. It's
Nice.
good. Yeah, no, it's been an enjoyable kind of, like it's got that little hit of of orange that's and zest and whatever in there and citrus, and it's really nice. No complaints here.
Right on. Well, mine's pretty mainstream today. I just I had it lying around, and I didn't feel like running off to grab some other beer, so I'm having a Miller Genuine Draft.
Oh,
Not very artisanal.
No, not very. This is the least artistic beer I've ever had on the show. But you know,
that's a fact.
it is. It's a nice little light beer. I mean, some people don't like it, some people do. But it's warm today, and I wanted a light beer, and I had it. So there you go, Miller time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've got I was gonna, if we were gonna do this later in the day, I was gonna drink my Persephone, which is a brewery just down up the road. But because this was only earlier in the day, I'm drinking my favorite. It's Close Hollow. You get this at London Drugs, cheap, and it is the best non-alcoholic beer. I defy you to think this is not beer. It's amazing. I drink a lot of this.
I haven't tried that one. I'll
For lunch.
take a look.
Yeah.
Excellent.
All right.
All right.
Okay,
PJ.
we got some questions. We got our guest questions. They're easy enough, but they open up a little bit. So I'll start. What's the most important book you've ever read?
Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, 1899. Trip up the Congo River to repatriate an ivory trader named Kurtz. You may have seen this story reprised in Apocalypse Now by, what's his name?
Marlon Brando was in it.
Marlon Brando and Martin Sheen and
Yeah.
and what's the Coppola, the director.
Francis Ford Coppola.
Coppola.
Yeah.
I say that. I guess that would be. It's. I certainly refer to it a lot. Heart of Darkness, and I think he's trying to describe the human condition.
All right.
Anything else you'd like to know about
it? Well, what more is there anything more you'd like to say about it? You know, like it is a classic, and it's been sort of one of those books that I've just not dove into yet, but it's one that I've been aware of for a very long time.
Yeah, I think it's the greatest depiction of a person traveling as far from home as possible, and it's a very interesting moment when he sails down from London, and he's about to go. He's off the coast of the Congo, and he's about to go inland up the river, and he's looking at his maps, and he sees the river on a map, and he likens it to a snake, winding to the river, and he likens himself to a little canary, some little bird who's hypnotized by the eyes of the snake, and he just has to go in there. He just has to go in there, to check out this snake or this river. So it just speaks to that quality in any adventurous person to leave home. It makes no sense to leave home. You leave all your security, all your friends. Why? What does that draw to come undone? What does that draw to come undone? Because that's the risk. And I think that's the risk. That's every fictional hero. That's what we're creating, somebody who is drawn away from home and you know they're going to come undone. Otherwise, I don't think we're watching. We're not there to see the film called The Valley of the Happy Nice People.
Yeah.
We don't want to go there.
That sounds creepy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right. That would be a horror film.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Valley of the Happy Nice People. Yeah.
Right.
Like something's going wrong for sure in this movie.
So this guy, trip up the Congo River, he just becomes increasingly unsettled and confused and afraid, and until he winds up in a fog, like the mist descends, and it's a perfect because he vanishes. He vanishes to himself. You can hardly see his hand in front of his face. And then the horror starts, and he finds Kurtz, and Kurtz, the rogue ivory trader. He's gone up there like he's supposed to be working for the company, but he's just gone native. He's gone feral, but he is free. Okay, here's the thing about the story: he has become free because this is that jungle is monstrous and free. Okay, in freedom, people become monsters. Like trees are huge. They're not being cut down. They're becoming monstrous. So it's monstrous and free; those go together. Now we see Kurtz, and he's the same. He's free, but he's monstrous. He's he's not explicit, but we think might have been resorting to cannibalism and whatnot. So the question is, can the human organism tolerate freedom, real freedom? And then the suggested answer is no. It's too much. Freedom is too much for the human being. Good book. Read it a dozen times.
All right. Well, maybe it's time. Maybe it's finally time to dive into it. All right, let's move on to your second question. What is a film that has had the greatest impact on you?
Well, I did mention Moonstruck. Yeah, do I have to pick one? I mean,
you can fire off a couple of them.
On the Waterfront with Marlon Brando, a most classic example of a character shedding his belief system. I think that's the greatest depiction of somebody coming out of his own belief system. Yeah. And then Moonstruck again, just because I remember that was a turning point for me, watching her in this active crisis and her dropping her belief system. But I think honestly that Good Will Hunting, I think, has the best depiction of somebody reaching the dead end, absolute dead end, cannot proceed one more second with how he's being. And Mark or Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, they wrote this script, when they're like 20 years old or so. I don't know how they did it, just to get that much insight into the human condition. Yeah, maybe it was a common theme in their Philadelphia or Boston rough, east side of town situation.
Well, as I understand, actually, like when they first started writing it, it was supposed to be a thriller. They were writing a thriller about this brilliant guy who gets in with like the CIA or something like that and uncovers, all kinds of nefarious dealings and whatever. And it obviously didn't go that way, but there's a scene where he's interviewing for a job with the CIA or something like that. And that's sort of, he gives him this speech of like, oh, well, let's say I give you the location, I crack a code, and now there's all these people who are dead. And like, that was actually kind of the story that they had originally set out to write.
Yeah.
So it's a mysterious process how things sometimes end up the way that they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brandon,
right.
You got the next question.
Yeah. All right. What's a song or album that takes you somewhere?
Procol Harum, Lighter Shade of Pale. You know that? This is going back, you see.
Like the organ, right? Like it's got that that iconic organ sound in it.
Lighter Shade of Pale. I guess can you remember that song?
I know the song.
Yeah. Takes me back to Expo '67 in Montreal. You guys weren't born yet, but there was a World's Fair in Montreal in 1967, and I worked there. I just graduated from University of Alberta, and I was supposed to go to Africa. Yeah, I had a job with CUSO in Africa. I was supposed to be a geography teacher in a little town on the shores of Lake Victoria. And I had to turn it down because I was offered this job at Expo. And it was a job I could not turn down. It was stage managing the mobile entertainers on site. They entertain lineups, people in the lineups. And yeah, no, it was great. I was a union, IATSE union. It was bags of money. And so I turned the Africa job down. But I said, when Expo's over, give me a call. And as soon as I got back to Edmonton, about the 1st of November, I got this call saying, can you be in Zambia in 5 days? And I said, sure. Good old, 22-year-old can do anything. So anyway, Lighter Shade of Pale was the big then, Procol Harum. And I remember the discos in Montreal were playing that. And I remember being out with this woman on one evening, and we just had a great time, mainly to that song. Okay.
So, there's always a woman.
Yeah. That's good.
Good stuff. All right. Oh, is it my question?
No, it's you, Evan.
It is me. All right. PJ, where do you think creativity comes from?
I think we maybe touched on that. Creativity probably comes from an inclination or a yearning not to be safe, not to buy into the rules of society that would keep us safe. Yeah, I've never considered myself. I never thought about being creative. I just do stuff. Maybe it's also, they say we all have it in us, which I'm sure is the case. But do we all have do we all feel free to just do it now? Like as a writer, you sit down to that white page. I've never had any trouble just writing. The white page, the blank page has never bothered me. But probably because I wrote for a living, and if I didn't get something in by 5 o'clock, I didn't get paid, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, an artist, if you don't feel free just to splash some paint on there, you're probably not going to be an artist. So maybe it's just this sense where we're not restrained. Now, where does that come from? Did we grow up with parents who were authoritative and put us down? Maybe that person's going to have a harder time being creative. And my parents, I know, my brother and I were talking about this. Neither of us can ever remember our parents saying we couldn't do something. Never in our entire lives. It would be like, Mom, I'm going down to the bush for a couple of days. I'm going to build a lean-to and down the river valley and North Saskatchewan River. So I'll grab a can of beans and I'll see you in a couple of days. And she'd say, this is in the winter. She'd say, okay, dear, well, be careful. That's it. So, but I know a lot of people whose parents were authoritative, and I think maybe they have trouble being creative. So maybe creativity is just a freedom to get what's in all of us out. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I can relate to that. I think that also, like, if your parents were authoritarian, it doesn't mean that you can't be creative later. But I definitely feel that was somewhat true for me, because I just remember doing a creative writing course or class in grade 5 or something like that, in 5th grade. And I remember I wrote my little story, And I remember this other kid wrote a story who was in my group, and his was so wildly creative. Mine was super tame and, like, in my opinion, at least, like super kind of controlled and very like almost like normal, you know? Whereas his was like he really like threw the paint, you know, he really tried some stuff. And I remember after that moment being like, wow, that's what creativity could be. And after that moment, I decided I wouldn't be so restricted anymore. I would try stuff. I would dare. And I still feel like that's something I'm working on. But I think there is a certain element of freedom and creativity. There's a certain parallel. We should explore that one day in a conversation, because yeah, I do feel like that, because like, I know I'm talking a lot here, but I have a client, and she's been working on her writing, and she was like blocked, and I'm like, okay, write a story about a potato walking down a street. And I was just joking. It was like an offhanded idea, and she did, and it was incredible. And everyone in the class was like, "This is such a great story. It's so good." And it was because she let herself not be in the confines of what, you know, a normal story had to be. So I think there is some kind of truth to that. I think you're tapping into something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all held in by something, a disbelief in ourselves, or something that's just hidden, some deep passion or intention or whatever that's buried, just buried. I think people need help getting it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people need help.
Well, you know, I think that in many ways that's, you know, there's that old sort of piece of wisdom for artists, which is you know, what you do, it should scare you a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, like it should scare you a little bit to say what you're about to say, to do what you're about to do. Because if you're not, you're probably not pushing on those edges. You're probably not pushing on those beliefs and those things if you don't feel a little bit of hesitancy and being scared about what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes this is some advice I got or tip from somebody at some point. And I use it now when I'm writing a scene, and maybe it's not to my satisfaction. I say, what is it about this scene or this part of the story that frightens me? You know, where do I fear to go in this scene here? And I think it's helpful for me to touch that place. I mean, there's a reason I'm creating this scene, but maybe I haven't really touched the nerve yet. So what is it about that frightens me? It can get pretty embarrassing, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna use that.
Yeah.
All right, next question. How do you find inspiration?
I've never just an inspiration to write a story.
Well, any type of inspiration.
Well, I think again, I started off wanting to write for children, and there's an interesting story how I came to that. But when I just have these little passions, you know, that I think kids need some help. So, and I had a great time raising my own son, and we had a wonderful time. And he grew up really quickly, I think, as a result. And I just it was just the best time of my life. But I want to tell you a story. This is back in the 80s, and again, before I decided to be a writer. So right in the mid 80s, there, the ranch and the Osho business, the Rajneesh business was over, and I didn't know what to do. And I did have a little interim security. In other words, I was making films for the Aga Khan. You know the Aga Khan, the spiritual leader of the Ismaili sect. He's one of the richest men in the world. He has a number of Ismaili people in Vancouver, lots. They run these little shops. And anyway, he lives in Paris. But so I was joining a film crew to make occasionally films for the Aga Khan over the next couple of years. So I could make enough money going out for about 2 or 3 months a year, and otherwise I could practice my writing. I went to this workshop. It was called The Art of Personal Marketing. art of personal marketing. And we were to, in this long weekend, we were to come up with what we really wanted to do in our life. And then at the end of the 3 days, we were going to stand up and make a pitch for who we are and what we were selling. And I remember it occurred to me, that I wanted to be, I want to be a writer. I want to write for kids. Now, I don't know how that came up, but it really did come up. And now one of the exercises was we pair up, and the person opposite you would deny your wish, okay? You deny your intention. So I'd say, I want to be a writer. And they'd go right in my face and say, you couldn't be a writer, if you tried for the rest of your life. No, I'm going to be a writer. You're just an asshole. You're just a dreamer. It's never going to happen. And no, I'm going to do it. This goes on and on and on until you're screaming, until you've found something, some real passion inside you, until you're screaming it out. And I tell you, that did it.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
For that reason, I think people, and it became clear to me, we have these passions that are hidden, that are buried. And so this woman had a real gimmick, a real trick. She's seen this before, obviously. People have to fight for it, have to fight to bring out what's in you. It sounds crazy, but that's the way it is, because we're we're sat upon and pressured, and society want to keep us safe and all of that. So inspiration, I think it may be buried, and yeah, that's how I think I found mine, and it exploded out.
All right. Next question. We're almost there. What is one thing that you would say to your childhood self?
What would I say to my childhood self? Well, it would be knowing that that writing would come to me, halfway through my life. I would just I would say don't not do anything. Don't not do anything. Don't restrict yourself. Because I just think the many things that I've done in my life just have led to this. We don't know how it's gonna happen. I suppose it could have been. I may not have. Something else might have happened. I might not have become a writer. I might have become an artist. I actually did have an art show once. I was just like therapy for myself. But I sort of got into pointillism, and I actually had a show of my pointillist works. But back in the 70s, yeah. So my young. It's an interesting question. I was just very lucky. I was very lucky. I had good mentors all through my life, back when I was 10 years old in our neighborhood in Edmonton, there were some older guys there who really took us younger kids under their wings, so to speak, and treated us like older people, like they were picking a football team. They would the big guy, the older guy would pick me, and that was very valuable to a younger person, to have that sort of support and respect of an older person. Yeah, you can't exaggerate that sort of value of that sort of thing. So yeah, and I'm still not answering your question, am I? What would I tell my younger self? I guess just don't be afraid to answer the call of adventure. That's the key thing. Don't be afraid to leave home. And I was lucky that nobody told me to stay home.
Like that. All right, one last question. What would your future self tell you now?
Oh, that's interesting. Have you done what's his name? Is a future authoring?
I think I have done that before, actually.
What's that guy's name? What's
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson. Yeah,
I haven't done his actual thing, but I've done something kind of similar to that. Yeah, and I've heard him talk about it in great detail.
Yeah. So, what would my future self say to me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he would say, I think he'd say, don't. I think he'd say, get to work. He'd say that it ain't over. Don't slack off, because there's a lot's going to happen. There's a lot to be done, and the danger is just to become an old person and not an elder. I mean, just become old and not be an elder. Yeah, I think he would say, consider you're going to be around for a while, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Nice.
Well, PJ, that's the last of our questions. If there's any final thoughts you would like to leave with us before we sign things off, as well as anything you want to tell our audience about, as to where they can learn more about you, find more about you, find some of your books, let the people know.
How far and wide does your podcast go?
Across the world and back, man.
Yeah, gee. Yeah, I think I told you that I tell you I was putting up these posters. Positive vitality is what keeps us healthy. Positive vitality is what keeps us healthy. I think in these times, that's really important, especially for people of a certain age, because they say we heard it before, without health you've got nothing, and I'm trying to remain healthy. So look, we covered a lot of ground here, and thank you for dredging it out dredging it out of me.
It's been a pleasure
to doing this with us. Yeah.
So there's lots of other stories, African stories and whatnot, but they've all just added up to this idea that we shouldn't be afraid to fail, and we shouldn't be afraid to suffer a bit, because that's essential to becoming who you're going to be. Absolutely. And don't be afraid to fail.
Terrific.
That's all I got to say.
Perfect.
All right. And if anyone's interested, you can go and check out and know more about PJ and his work. Go to PJ Reece, and that's Reece with a C, .ca. And you can see about all of his work and learn more about him. Thanks again, PJ. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.